please welcome back Jeff Lundell and boat captain and bowman, Oracle Team USA, Brad Webb.
Boy, it never gets old, does it?
It really doesn't. I love being in the presence of this lovely lady, and yeah, it's very, very cool.
Yeah, it's chills running down the spine every time I see the video, same type of reaction. So a pleasure to be up here with you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with just a little background. So what inspired you to start sailing? How'd you get into it?
You know, I grew up by the water in Wellington, New Zealand, and really just looked out on the water and wanted to be out there. And I used to see sailboats out there as a kid growing up, and I just keep badgering my father until he finally bought me a boat. And yeah, and so I started out in a little P-class dinghy, which is one of the most popular beginning classes in New Zealand. And I had to pay that off by mowing lawns and washing cars, but that was really where I started.
Yeah, good. Tell us a little bit about your role as captain and bowman, what that entails, your responsibilities, your leadership.
Yeah, so my career, I mean, like any career, really evolved through a number of different ways. And I did my first America's Cup in 1995 in San Diego. And it was the very, very beginning of my career, and I didn't really look at it as it was my career on a silver platter. So I went out and just tried to do as much sailing as I could and tried to get as much experience as I could around the world, sailing with different people on different boats. And that would really ground me for later in my career, because I understood very early on that it was okay to be a good sailor, but you needed more. You needed more in your quiver. So from there, I spent the next 5 years just sailing around the world, and I'm not going to lie, I had a good time. And then I was lucky enough, I found myself at the next America's Cup, which is in New Zealand in 2000, and then with another San Francisco team. And then from there I joined Oracle. So I've actually been with Oracle since 2000, 4 campaigns, 2 successful, two unsuccessful. And then obviously we were successful in 2010 with the trimaran, and then this last time round. So up until 2007, for those of you not familiar with sailing, we were sailing monohull boats, which is more or less what the America's Cup has been about since its inception in 1851. And then in 2010, we had this a big multi-hull race between ourselves and the current defender, Alinghi. And it really woke the world up, and certainly woke us up as sailors, we'd always, monohull sailors have always kind of pushed away multi-hulls, like this crazy kind of left-wing faction. And mainly because they're French, but I apologize to any French people who want this. But it really woke our eyes up to how exciting sailing could, or how, the next level we could take sailing to. So that's what happened for the change between 2007, which is when we last sailed monohulls, through to this last time. And it really took, it was really the vision of Larry and Russell to try something new, to take this huge risk. And okay, they went out and kind of polled, a number of people in the industry and the kind of the global sailing community. But like with anything, when you're coming out with something new and risky, there's always half the people are into it, and then the other half really want to stay with the status quo. But they decided that this big departure and this big change in the multi-hulls was the way to go, and that's how we ended up with these multi-hulls in 2013. So back when we were sailing monohulls, my role was a bowman, which was up the front of the boat, and I'd be part of a crew. So on the multi-hulls we had in 2007, we had 17 people on the boat, and all of those individuals on the boat had very, very specific roles. And I kind of modeled my career on being a bowman, which is at the very front of the boat. We help, in that role, we help start the boat. We're at the we kind of communicate with the back of the boat. We also have our own little team up the front there, with the foredeck team. We're working with 4 or 5 others to really help get sails up and down at corners and help race the boat around the racetrack. But again, when we switched into switched into multi-hulls, the boats all of a sudden were going 3 times faster. We didn't need all these sails that we'd used in the past. And so the role of the bowman really went away. And so this last time around, I became a grinder. And one of my roles was helping get the boards up and down. You saw on the video there we were using foiling boards on each hull, which actually helped the boat sail out of the water. Very rarely is the boat actually in the water. And for me that was quite a departure from how I'd laid my career out. But as I mentioned in the beginning, part of my plan for my career was to learn as much as I could beyond just the sailing aspect. And from that I now have experience in running the systems on the boat, managing people, understanding boat building techniques. And so that's how I was ultimately put in the role as boat captain, because I understood all these different factors that were part of putting the boat together each day.
Yeah, fantastic. So a very well-rounded experience that has led to where you are today.
Exactly.
So you mentioned that you had joined Oracle Team USA and Larry's organization. How did you find your way to the organization? How long have you been on the team? And I'm going to ask you a question within a question. Help us understand what it's like working closely with Larry. What's he really like?
Yeah, and I get that a lot. So
yeah, if you can strike that part from the video, that'd be great.
Yeah, you're okay. So yeah, I joined in 2000, and that part of it is really a long story. But this last campaign, there were only 2 of us left on the sailing team from the original squad in 2000. We probably rolled through 100 different sailors over the course of a dozen years. So whatever it was I did. I didn't really ever question it. I just kind of kept my head down and kept plugging away and learning new things and pushing forward. And I think that's ultimately what the essence of the team is, that we never give up. We're always looking for new things to do. We're always looking to upskill and innovate in our own little world, knowing that this global innovation is going on around us within the team. But being with the team and being ultimately under Larry's leadership for that time, the team itself has gone through a number of leadership changes, and we've seen that through each campaign. But ultimately, Larry's always been at the top, and he's always been a risk taker. I've always been found myself in meetings throughout the course of all these campaigns where there's a big decision to be made, and it's a risky decision. We're kind of really pushing the envelope, and within those decisions, Larry was always involved. And so for me, from the outside, I mean, Larry always used to come sailing with us, but especially in the role of the bowman. I'll tell you one little story. We did a regatta in San Francisco in 2003, and it was a tight race on San Francisco's city front with a lingy. They were calling it the rematch. And we were in a situation on the city front, and those San Francisco is very windy, so things tend to get fairly hairy out there. And we were coming into a dip, which is where the boats effectively cross, and we were in the boat that had to give way to our competitor. And so my role is to go to the front of the boat and effectively look the helmsman in the eye and give him direction, because he can't see the other boat. The sails are now in the way. And I got to say, it's an interesting moment when you're staring back at a billionaire and you're giving him the eye because you want him to listen to what you're saying. So, whenever he was on the boat, he was always very humble, because he knew he was, in that element, he was surrounded by people that were better than him, that knew more than him. But that didn't stop his passion. I mean, he's very passionate. I've been lucky enough to see a number of his keynotes in San Francisco during Open World. And what always strikes me is how passionate he is. He talks about Oracle and the products and what they're doing, and he's exactly the same with the team and with sailing. And the times that I've sailed with him on small boats where we really have been a small team, it's been the same. He's very, very passionate about what he's doing and wants to learn more, wants to know more, wants to take that next step. So that for me is really been one of the great things about being part of Oracle, because it's always been this team that just wants to be better and wants to be that next step ahead.
Mm-hmm. Great. Sailing has been a niche type of sport for the viewing public, but with this wind, it became more mainstream. This wind, it became more mainstream. Can you give us a little bit of a tutorial on the sport and how you think this wind has affected the sport and the future of the sport?
Yeah, well, the idea that Russell and Larry had was they wanted to take it more mainstream by having faster boats, younger crews, because we're all kind of starting to get a little bit long in the tooth, and just make it, more edge of the seat so people can sit down and watch it. And for those of you that did watch it on television, you'd have noticed there was even a new background technology that they were using to try and bring sailing to the audience, where they would overlay different aspects of the race course, whether it was wind or current, where the marks were, or where the ley lines were, so that the average viewer at home could sit there and actually get a better understanding of what was going on. So that was a really interesting side technology that was going on this time around, which I think really helped broaden the fan base. Also for us, we brought on Puma and Red Bull, which are more kind of promote a younger crowd. So that was really the idea, and even going on to this next America's Cup, I think the boats are going to be slightly smaller crews, which is ultimately to try and bring the cost down, but no less exciting. That's the idea, is to make it exciting for people to watch. But this last time around, I think a lot of it had to do with the comeback. People got involved with the story. They enjoyed, they connected with what was going on and the human interest aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was huge. It was really exciting. So let's talk about that. So the biggest comeback in sporting history. Mm-hmm. Down 8-1, you have to win 8 in a row. No chance for any loss, or you're out of the regatta. A little bit of levity comes into it when Jimmy comments that we're really in the driver's seat. Tell us a little bit about what happened behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's actually a great comment from Jimmy. I mean, when he says it, he actually believes it. And that's a real testament to his leadership, because from that point on, he was the leader of the sailing team. He was ultimately running the team as much as Larry and Russell were above him. It really fell to the sailing team. But prior to being 8-1 down, when we were 6-1 down, we had a meeting. We could obviously, the hole we were digging ourselves was getting pretty dark. And so we got everybody in a room, and it was packed. It was wall to wall, standing room only. And in the middle sat our lead designer, and he looked around the room and he said, "Okay, I want ideas from anyone. I don't care what you've got, whether it's big or small, where you think it's a good idea or a bad idea. I want anything from everyone." And an interesting thing happened there is, we were a large team. We're about 120 people, and even with a team that small or big, however you look at it, there's always those, little political groups and, cliques and factions going on. But in that meeting, everything was left at the door. This was close to match point. Everything was left at the door. And it was interesting, at the end of that meeting, he didn't have much. It was a scrap bit of paper, some random thoughts, some random notes. But it was something. It was something for us to build on, even though things were getting pretty tight. And we went away. They prioritised what items could be put into play immediately, and then they figured out what needed just a little bit more research before it could go into play. But we would slip 2 more races down before things turned around. So if we'd had that meeting a day later, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. But it did turn around, and those little things. It was no silver bullet either. Everybody kind of keeps looking, keeps asking, what was that one thing you did? And the fact of the matter is, there wasn't one thing. It was just a lot of ideas from a lot of different people, and slowly but surely put into play, so that we could slowly turn this thing around and start climbing the mountain again.
Yeah, it's exciting. So no silver bullet, no one single thing, but within all of that, was there a defining moment, or was there a moment of clarity, where the team around the table just looked at each other and you guys said, "We got it"?
No, really not.
Really?
It was scary to the very end.
So when did you feel that you could really win this America's Cup?
Really not until we crossed the finish line.
Okay.
We never gave, and this is a true story. So we found out around about the time we were 6-7-1 down that Team New Zealand had a 777 sitting on the tarmac at SFO, and they'd already booked out the top level of one of the nicest hotels in Auckland for a comeback party. And that was enough to drive us.
Okay.
And we're like, okay, really? Let's see how you go with this.
Yeah.
And on the flip side of that, and even in the race, those of you that are watching the racing, the race that was called off, they were about a minute from the finishing line and the time limit ran out. That rule was their rule, by the way, for any Kiwis in the audience that want to fight me on. That was their rule. And the time limit ran out, and otherwise that would have been the cup for them. we heard that as they turned the bottom mark, they were starting to take the tops off all the champagne bottles back at the base. And I don't know whether they put the corks back in or whether they threw it out. But yeah, so we heard all these little stories, and it was just enough to drive us that little bit, you know, okay, we're not going down without a fight here. And on the flip side of that, when we won, we had nothing. Nothing was organised. We were at the Innovation Lounge that night, and then because the regatta had run so long, everybody kept, those that had planned to leave, just kept pushing their flights and pushing their flights and pushing their flights to the point where the day after the regatta finished, everybody was gone. So that was the flip side of it for us.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. So tell us a little bit about the Oracle in Oracle Team USA. How do you leverage data? How do you leverage technology? How important of a role do both those components play in these new modern vessels, and how did they help you guys really exceed the overcoming odds and win this America's Cup?
Yeah, it's huge, and I guess I hate calling myself old, but now I've done 6 America's Cups, and I've had that benefit of seeing the development. I mean, technology has exploded in our general lives, but watching it, how it's exploded within the sport that I've been very much ingrained in, has been really interesting to me. When I think back to 1995 and the kind of technology we're using then to now, it's kind of mind-boggling. And for me as a sailor, the biggest thing for me is having the information set up real time, and it's available to me based on my job. As I mentioned earlier, one of my jobs was in the cockpit 3, managing the board. So I would have a PDA in each of my cockpits that was giving me information based solely on my job, the position of the boards. The boards were basically a 3-dimensional fore and aft, up and down, in and out. So I would have numbers being fed to me real time as to what position those boards were in. And we're also using hydraulic systems to drive all of these. And all the hydraulic valves was electronically operated. And then while we're testing, all that information, not only is it stored on board on an onboard server, but it's also sent real time to one of our chase boats, when we have half a dozen analysts following us around all day, managing our data real time. So if at any point during the day we want a valve to be sped up, or we want to rerun the last 30 seconds, or we want to change an aspect of the wing or an aspect of how we're sailing, we can do that very, very quickly. And so that for me is one of the biggest uses that we have in data. And the biggest shift for me that I've noticed is that we've had these guys that are very, very smart within our team that have had all this information, and the biggest challenge has been conveying that to us and putting it up on a screen, presenting it to us in a manner that we understand. Because now, I mean, we're getting to the point where we have 300 sensors all over the boat feeding massive amounts of data in. And so being able to go back and dig through that and find something that we want that's useful, that pertains to our jobs has been one of the biggest challenges, but also one of the biggest rewards, because we really have a finite understanding of what's going on the boat now.
Yeah, quite a difference from the lack of technology that was present when you first started.
Exactly. I mean, back then it was very seat of the pants, and that still hasn't gone away. We still use very seat of the pants method. I mean, every now and then a sensor will, go out of whack, or we'll have a cal that's not right, or whatever it might be, and our seat of the pants experience will still alert us, there's something not quite right here. But then, really getting down to those finite, details and that information that really help us make those steps forward is what's exciting, what's available to us.
Yeah, it's great. Very similar to what we're seeing in our marketplace.
Yeah, exactly.
So what do you find yourself doing now? How has this win changed your life? How has it affected what you do on a daily basis? What do you do to fill your time now as you get ready for the next America's Cup?
Yeah, well, what's going on now is that they're trying to put a new protocol together, a new design together. Larry and Russell aren't happy just to sit on the 72. There were some issues with the 72, so those are being worked on so that we have a more efficient America's Cup is what they're trying to get to. And they still haven't figured out a venue yet. And Chicago, just out here, is on the table. But that hasn't been figured out yet. So there's still some planning still to go on. But I think the America's Cup is. I mean, look at this beautiful lady. I mean, it's 160-something years old. It's just one of those things that I think that aspires people and inspires people to to fight for something so beautiful. And it has such an amazing history behind it.
Mm-hmm. So you talked a little bit about venue. The San Francisco venue was unique because the racing was so close to the public. It would be fantastic to have it here on Lake Michigan. I'll continue to make my lobbies for that. What was it like competing in that venue? So very unique, very close, very upfront, your ability to come by the viewing stand immediately after the race. Was there a connectivity to the fan base that really helped you guys out, that made this feel different for you?
Yeah, absolutely. And I fell in love with San Francisco a long time ago. I first went to San Francisco in 1996, and I remember walking down Fillmore Street for the first time, coming around the corner and just seeing the morning light on the Golden Gate Bridge, and that was it for me. And from there, even when I was doing my global travels, I would always find a way to come back through San Francisco because there was always something going on. There was always some sailing going on. It's always windy there, and the seafront's just magic. So for me, being part of the team that brought the Cup to San Francisco and being part of that vision, understanding Larry's vision as well. He was talking about this, when we first started the team in 2000, about how he saw us sailing, big boats on San Francisco in the middle of summer with the sun and the water and the crowds and all the rest of it. And I certainly got on board with that, and I moved and have been living in San Francisco myself for about 10 years. So, I've very much been on board with that vision. I don't think we ever thought that it was going to be in ridiculously fast multi-hulls, and so that aspect of it was what really changed the game this time. And they had to, the deed of gift which ultimately governs the America's Cup in the past has stipulated the America's Cup must be held offshore away from headlands, and which has made it very difficult for people to get access to. You always had to get on a boat and go trucking offshore, and it's hard for people to hold on to their champagne when you're rolling around. So they got the consent of all the other challengers and all the other teams that thought it was a great idea to bring it inside the gate, to hold it inside the bay. And it's a tricky venue because, okay, it's windy, but because of the bridge and the headlands and the city front, the wind does some weird things in the city, and of course we've got incredible current that goes in and out every day, which really makes it a really tricky place to sail. But as sailors, we like that challenge. We like that idea that we're, ultimately we're taking on Mother Nature, and to be able to sail in that environment, I think is what is very special for all of us that have sailed there. But then the shore side of it just made it so much easier for the accessibility for people to be able to go down and watch the racing. There's no getting on, you could if you want, but there was no getting on boats and charging offshore. You could stand there on the city front and watch these boats just go rocketing by. Very similar to standing on the course of the Formula One track, which was ultimately what the idea was and what the vision was. So, I was on shore every day, but I was on the water every day, but the feedback I got was very much that the access and people be able to get up close and see the sailors in the morning and have that flyby at the end of the day, and have the finish line right there where people could almost reach out and touch the guys and touch the boats was huge. But so I think that venue and that style of venue was a huge success. So if it's not in San Francisco, they're certainly trying to find a way to replicate that wherever it might be.
Yeah. Well, mission accomplished. It was totally awesome. Very exciting, and as we talked about, it built a stronger fan base. So the next America's Cup, you guys are going to have a target on your back, right? This
Always
is an insurmountable feat that you need to overcome, and it sure would be great if you just came out and won, straight up. What in your closing comments, because I think is the last question I have, but what would you want from us as fans? Or what would you ask the fan base to do more of, to do less of? How can we be better fans as we support you and Oracle Team USA into the next America's Cup?
Yeah, actually, I think a lot of the responsibility falls to us. I think we have a phenomenal fan base out there, and I think our fans actually do a great job of doing what they do. We are the ones that actually have to do a better job, I think, of reaching out and doing more things like this, where you guys can come and see the cup and take your photo with the cup and get more information, have more of an understanding of what we do and how we do it. So I think a lot of that responsibility falls to us, and so I think we learned a lot of great lessons last time, especially with having great companies like Red Bull and Puma. That's a huge part of their deal is reaching out for people and making sure people stay connected, especially Red Bull. I mean, Red Bull are phenomenal at it, and I think we learned a lot of lessons from that. And Jimmy's great at that as well. I mean, Jimmy's phenomenal at getting out and getting in touch with the fans and really driving that message of what we're doing and what we're trying to do. And I mean, ultimately we're trying to inspire people to enjoy sailing, but enjoy watching what we're doing. It's a tough sport for some people, for a lot of people to understand. So again, it falls to us to get people to understand that and to really enjoy what they're watching.
Yeah. Well, we're behind you. We appreciate what you guys did. It was very patriotic. It was very exciting. Again, every time I see that video, it's the same type of reaction as I'm sure everybody in the crowd feels as well. We thank you for being here with us today, not only for this session, but for what you're going to be doing throughout the day, offering to have your picture taken with the cup with people. So thank you for everything, and it's been a real pleasure spending time with you today.
My pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks again. Appreciate it.